Hello and welcome to Unsourced. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. First and foremost, I want to start off by saying some words on the unfortunate passing of artist Ron Smith, who did so much work for 2000 AD, so much vibrant and so much iconic characters such as Mayor Dave or Otto Sump, and there has been such an outpouring of remembrance and affection and just complete sincerity about his works and the contributions he made to the comics and to the magazine in general. And so I just want to say that even though I'm always going to be on the fringes of 2000 AD and that whole sort of mega escape, just going through and seeing what exactly and learning from so many other people what intrinsic things Smith did makes me realize that he was definitely one of the most classic and just a wellspring of creativity, and a lot of what he did inform my enjoyment and what I find so unique and so special about that entire franchise. So it's harsh to hear that he's passed, and it is incredibly saddening. But when we hear and when we see just the flood of emotion and people who were touched, whether they be peers or fans, then that's really sort of the foundational monument for them. And so I hope that his work remains well within the mindsets, the remembrances, and the vivid imaginations of all the people who read those stories, because that is a legacy, and I have no doubt that he is going to be a well-worn and well-honed one in the years to come. So rest in peace, Ron Smith. You will be missed. And if you want to hear more about his illustrious career and the impact that he made on 2000 AD and on the stories he was a part of, I'm going to link below to a thread remembering him from one of my mutuals on Twitter called Judge Anon, who did a wonderful and incredibly informative and lively retrospective on him. And it is well worth the read, and it is just a really beautiful eulogy, honestly. So check that out. Now, as we move on into regular news, in terms of movie news, there's actually not that much. The only thing of interest to me, at least, is that Venom 2 has started active pre-development, with the screenwriter of the first one officially coming back to write the script for the sequel. But it turns out that apparently the director for the first one might not be coming back due to scheduling issues. Apparently they're meant to be shooting Zombieland 2, and so he's probably not making a return, which is a lot more worrisome to me, because the script to Venom wasn't the strong point. It was a lot more about the energy, the acting, the atmosphere, the momentum of everything, just the whole sort of freewheeling, kinetic, and honestly easygoing experience of it all. And I feel like that has a lot to do with the director as well, who brought that same sort of liveliness to Zombieland. I feel like maybe he was a keystone to all this. A lot more issues with the sequel if they don't find the right person to helm it. And honestly, I would much prefer him to come back to Venom 2 than to do a Zombieland 2. But I am glad to see that things are still rolling with it rather than taking a step back, because you have to strike when the iron is hot, and this thing is still making some cash on VOD and DVD. Other than that, the only really interesting thing to happen in movie news this week is that in an interview, Samuel L. Jackson did announce, or at least did reveal, a key plot point for Avengers Endgame, which then a lot of comic news and journalism sites decided to run as the biggest spoiler ever, despite the fact that it being pretty much the one thing that everyone guessed. I mean, the only real thing that it actually reveals is that it might be implemented in a really, really stupid way, which I hope is him just sort of vaguely describing something, because if it's vague and there's actually more to it, then that'd be fucking great. It makes me even less interested in the movies preceding Infinity War Part 2. That's pretty much it for movie news. Not much at all. Let's head on into television news. Perhaps most famously, we did get the first look at Watchmen as part of some Golden Globes HBO sizzle reel. And so it's only like 3 or 4 seconds of footage. Police officers with yellow masks, some sort of Rorschach 2 with a similar but static imaged mask on his face. Jeremy Irons as apparently Ozymandias, we won't know. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all they had time to actually show. I don't think that looks that interesting, because why the orange masked cops. Those images were actually online months before this, behind the scenes images, and everyone sort of assumed that they would be for effects shots, but to actually see them be like, no wait, cops just have orange masks now is kind of, well, cheesy, and it might not work. I don't know. There's not enough here to really sort of dig into, but hopefully at least the Rorschach 2 mask is pre-special effects, because just having a static image with like eye holes in it looks really, really unimpressive. Fingers crossed for that. The only other thing in television news is that Legion Season 3 has started casting for new characters and mutants, which just makes me happy that Legion Season 3 is still happening, that it's still going forward with the entire Disney Fox kerfuffle. I was worried that there might be some sort of reluctance to keep it moving, but I'm glad, and I hope that this third season, which may very well be the final season, is able to round out this story in a nice, concise manner. Fingers crossed though. In terms of comic news, the only thing that popped out was this interesting thing that I have actually been wondering ever since the Umbrella Academy has been picked up for a Netflix show, despite the huge hiatus between volumes in the comics. But apparently Gerard Way has made some comments about it. So what did he say? Apparently Gerard Way has planned for 5 more arcs in the comic series and has already made plans to integrate the stories into the show. So I don't really know how exactly that's going to work, because Netflix shows usually put out once a year. From the looks of it, the show's first season is going to combine aspects of the first 2 arcs. So maybe that'll be able to balance out, but I am skeptical. But it's at least nice to know that Gerard Way isn't giving up on the comics, because that would honestly be a real pot shot to people who like the comic, who've been reading it, and who've been following it. And I'm just glad that's not going to happen here. But anyway, that's it for news this week. Let's move on into another packed week, because why not? There's so many new releases. I read them all, and let's just try to keep this in a nice, contained hot shots manner. But here we go with what I read this week. Okay, to start with, let's go with Criminal Number 1, which is part of the new ongoing series by Brubaker and Phillips. Now, with Brubaker and Phillips, I do believe that the last couple of years, they've been putting out a lot of duds. The Fade Out, an awful, overly long and dragged out retread of one of their stories from Criminal. Fatal, meandering, messy, pointless, and honestly aggravating in terms of how the story develops, and thematically muddled, honestly. Kill or Be Killed. Just a terrible comic that only really works if you're reading it for the first time, but on reflection is probably an insanely boring, mismanaged, and repetitive as hell comic. So I wasn't very enthusiastic about the prospect of Criminal returning, especially with a first arc being about the Lawless family, who have really dominated the entire series. And it is irritating where you have this whole wide city and landscape and mythology you can use, and it always seems to go right back down to the Lawless family. But call it nostalgia, call it relief, call it just blind faith that this creative team that I know can do really amazing stuff is back on form again. But Criminal Number 1 was a genuine surprise, and I'm glad it exists, since not only is it good, but it also makes for a refreshing and exciting start to another Lawless story, feeling much more in tune with the heights that both these creators are capable of, but also really perfectly hitting the notes of a crime series. Just the agonizing, dramatic weight, the troubled, torn character dynamics, and just the rolling ball of upcoming and foreshadowed destruction, mayhem, and chaos, all because characters are on this destructive and insanely unproductive life path that they've chosen. It's tragedy. That's what I really love about Criminal and series like Stray Bullets and all these other ones that are able to really find the balance. Now, they all put different measures into different aspects, but they all know what mix these things need to have. Well, they hit the mark, and I'm so glad that Criminal shows that they still know what it takes to make for an exciting, engaging, and really entertaining comic. So yeah, no, 2 thumbs up to Criminal Number 1. Next up is Kick-Ass number 11, which is the penultimate issue for this arc, and of the arc overall, I have to say that the baton was passed quite capably, keeping much of that insane, raucous plotting and thrills. The issue doesn't have quite the same spark as previous penultimate issues, which were well marked for how crazy, dire, insane, and laughably weird and wacky they could be. But it's still a solid and engaging read. Things have finally rolled, everything makes sense in character, the plot has finally reached a sort of crescendo, and it just feels, well, it feels more standard, and I can't lie about that. But it's still able to grip you because it's so competent and it was done in such an effective way. So yeah, no, can't wait for the finale. I hope it reaches that perfectly kick-ass point, and that I hope to see Kick-Ass in general stay in stable creative hands after this. Moving on to The Wrong Earth number 5, which was another great installment. I had to say this series is probably the star player in the entire Ahoy Comics opening line. Things are getting a bit more serious, a bit more dangerous, and quite a bit more scary. But the life and heart of the book carries it forward with the same amount of fun, momentum, and classic vibrancy. This issue, while also moving things forward, also opened itself up and its story considerably, which has me excited for the future because it goes from something that is a simple story to something that, while staying true to itself and true to the formula that it's trying to recreate, possibly creating something a lot more branching out from that, and I can't wait to see that. Next up is The Green Lantern number 3, which I have to say, overall, it's pretty astounding how I didn't start off impressed much with this series when it was announced and with the first issue, but now by the third issue, it has reached and touched upon every aspect of what I love about Hal, his personality, and his dynamics with the universe, his mythology, and his cast of characters, but with an incredibly unique bite. Sharp is giving this book the art of his career, and Morrison is truly writing what he promised to write, which was a cop book set in space. He didn't lie about that, no matter how people might have felt when he said that, and then you get all these crazy solicits. At its heart and at its core, it's still just that cop book. You have Hal's brash and bold policeman's outlook perfectly being placed and contrasted with the greater cosmic tendencies and setups that Morrison is trying to utilize to fireworks of effects, because it's so punchy, it's blunt, it's so pathos driven, it all works so well. But now you're seeing it portrayed on this grander scale, working to create actual drama by these characters taking their jobs as seriously as they would if it was grounded series. 2 thumbs up, it was amazing and has some moments that have already started to supplant some of my favorite Hal moments and stories ever. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. Next is Die number 2 from Kieran Gillen, and I reviewed the first issue when that came out last month, and I wasn't impressed with it. I thought it was boring, a slog, and overly repetitive without any rhyme or reason. This issue is a marked step up. There are still some writing quirks and ticks I don't like about it, but I feel like they need to exist for the general sort of readership that might not know the nitty and gritty of D&D and RPG style sort of terminology, and so those are very obvious and blunt gimme jokes he inserts into the story. But overall, it didn't blow my socks off. But for a story about adults trapped in RPG land, it's not bad. It's decent enough. That's pretty much all I can say about it. There are some good setups, lines, and character interactions in here, and I hope that continues, but overall, it's not the most engaging or exciting or really depthy series yet. But it's good to know that the premise overall isn't being wasted. It's being used to definite effect. So, 2 thumbs middle. After that is Martian Manhunter number 2, which makes for 2 issues in a row that Steve Orlando hasn't fucked up, because he is doing some great stuff with this series. It feels really sort of encapsulating and classic, and if you're doing this whole tangential 12-issue solitary maxi series, it's doing a great job making this feel like a well-worn read and fully accessible as a retelling of the Martian Manhunter mythology, because this issue is like 95% world building. So while the overarching story might not be moving forward yet, what might keep this as a golden evergreen once it wraps up is fully being played with. Just the heart, the emotional positivity and love and care being put into that stuff. Well, it all works. It feels like a great story about this character and trying to, re-up and reimagine and sort of modernize the various things that creators and writers and artists and events have added to the lore. So yeah, no, 2 thumbs up. It was great. I had a real great time with it. I think the art is, well, unique, but it works really well with the Martian landscapes and characters. Maybe not so much with the human stuff, but it's very evocative and it's very fun and lively to read. So hopefully that continues for the next 10 issues. I can be okay with the main overarching story being lame if everything else just feels more comfortable and more well understanding of what this series needs to be. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. Now we head on into my favorite issue of the week, which was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The Tempest, number 4, because they're just blazing right through this series with only 2 issues left after this. And this one really does get the entire sort of atmospheric closure that this arc has been well honing dead on. Not only do we get set pieces only alluded to by anecdotal stuff either in previous volumes or in the Black Dossier, fully rendered and fully realized here, but we start to see just the impact they had on the series and the characters in an overall grandiose sense. So the entire cyclic closure that this story is really all about really coming full circle. And that's why I really love this series. I've said it again and again, but this arc has really perfected that sense that yes, what has come is coming again and everything has its time and place. So we have all the foreshadowing, all the tangential literary references and connections finally being tied together into a tapestry here, and it works. It's really, really fun, and I just love having read all of the volumes and all of the sort of back matter and seeing that, yes, these things had a place, they had a rhyme, they had a reason, and they all fit in some way into this grander puzzle. And now we're finally seeing the image of it. This issue continues the previous issue's sort of aesthetical presence as well, with each couple of pages being a new art style or a new homage to another comic work or literary work, which again is, well, it's really fun to just sort of go back and forth and seeing all these different expressions of the story. Well, it works. Like I said, it didn't work in Black Dossier, but it works here in this arc. And everything about it is just so fun, varied, and it just pulls you right into it. And everything is just a feast to read and to just sort of engage and immerse with. That the only complaint I have about it is that Moore is reusing for the 3rd time the exact same apocalypse he's used 2 times before. It's the exact same apocalypse he used in Promethea and the exact same one he used in Providence, and he's using it again here. But the fact that it's repetitious means less to me because it's still really well done. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. I love this series. And now for the things that I didn't really enjoy that much, let's just get it over with. Young Justice number 1, which is the grand return for all these fan favorite characters. And I've already seen so many reactions going, well, I don't really like teen comics that much, but thank God my heroes are back. These are literal words and verbatim I saw online. So despite whatever I might think about this series, it already seems to have been successful at what it wanted to do and with the audience it wanted to get. So what matters anymore? But here's what I thought about it. It was a bright, messy haze of a read. Like, it was almost incomprehensible. And what I mean by that is that I read it 3 times and I couldn't make heads or tails of what actually happened. Who did it, why they did it, where they did it, and what was being said at all. It's blurry. The art, while technically well done, is all over the place and unfocused, and it's just a mess of bright neon and pastel colors blown all over the place, which is not aided by the inane, scattered, and almost rambling dialogue. It's like trying to read a comic with a head cold. It's honestly astounding how unreadable this is, which is only really mitigated by the fact that nothing happens in it. And so yes, I can see why this would appeal to people who are only here for the characters, because there's lots of great panels showcasing the characters. That's pretty much it. The rest of it is kind of trash. So 2 thumbs down. It was insanely bad. And lastly, we have The Dreaming number 5, which wasn't as bad as Young Justice, but it's still, I guess, not that good. It feels like such a filler issue, sudden stop to the momentum that's been building up for the last 4 issues. And then you have this, which just feels like, oh yeah, we're biding time now, which the penultimate issue to your first arc isn't where you should put an issue like this. And it's really hard to engage with, and I was honestly insanely bored reading it. So yeah, 2 thumbs down. And I guess that's it for what I read this week. Overall, there was a lot more that I enjoyed and I had a really good time with. So I guess it balances out. Can't wait for next week, and I can't can't wait to see what's out then. Alright, so let's move on into what I watched this week with another episode of Gotham called Trespassers. And, well, it's not as strong an outing as the previous episode. Not by any fair margin, at least. It lacked the punch. It lacked a lot of the more sort of gripping and honestly surprising and wild moments. It's a lot more standard, and you don't really get the whole chaotic messiness or the sort of building momentum toward, well, the entirely dire threat that permeated the entirety of the premiere, where you have actions and reactions to stuff only worsening the situation. There's a little bit of that here, but it seems to be more just characters trying to bridge one dynamic to another, and that's really what this episode seems to be caring more about, getting things in place. And I know that seems similar to what I'm talking about before, about what I liked about the premiere, but it's really more about how it's executed and how much actual sort of character integrity they put into it. This one feels a lot more flat. It feels a lot more sort of static and goal oriented in the premiere, which felt a lot more natural, and it felt like things actually did come out of what the characters were actually trying to attain, and also the interpersonal stuff that motivated and influence that. This, not so much. There's still some entertaining moments here, especially with Riddler going madhouse insane on the underbelly of Gotham, and, well, the final shot of the episode is pretty much just a ripoff of Michael Jackson's Thriller, but it's not that memorable. I think the only thing that would stand out is quite possibly the appearance of Cassandra Cain's father as, I guess, like a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. So I guess that's neat, but it feels like something that you would say would be neat in the early days of Gotham, where things just showed up. There's so many other things I'm excited for. I hope that the next 10 episodes or so really do get a good groove going, but fingers crossed. Anyway, I do feel that with only 13 episodes, they could be hitting it out of the park more consistently and more from the get-go than they are right now. But yeah, one thumb up, one thumb middle. So let's move on into listener questions. And our only question comes from the incomparable AkiCat on Twitter, and their question is, if I wanted a Booster Gold ongoing, which writer would I want on it and why? And, well, I mean, I never thought about it, but I guess I would in general like the idea of a Booster Gold ongoing. I mean, why not? Where's the harm? And it's almost guaranteed fun unless they get something really crap on it. So if I wanted a writer on it, it would have to be Mark Russell, because I think his usually sharp wit, his knack for satire, and the light and lively and just joyous way he writes sometimes when it comes to very sort of freewheeling characters would be an amazing mix. And when you compound that with, the time travel antics or the way his flightiness does some harm to his interpersonal relationships, I think that would create, honestly, a lot of magic. And now that I've said it, I'm kind of disappointed that Mark Russell isn't working on a Booster Gold ongoing right now. So yeah, that would have to be it. And hopefully it won't just have to be something I'm thinking up right now. Fingers crossed that someday he gets a shot at it. Thank you for your question, AkiCat, and I hope I answered it to your satisfaction. And I just want to thank everyone out there who has sent in questions, thoughts, comments, and feedback. I appreciate all of it, and it's so amazing. And I can't wait to get more into this year. It's already off such a great start, and I'm having such fun with this, and I hope you guys are too. Alright, so I want to give a shout out to the cover artist who did the cover art for the show. I am still supremely grateful. You can find them on Twitter at DOTEMCEE. And if anyone out there has their own comments, questions, or topics for the show, you can find me on Twitter as well at THE_SNICKMAN. And I just want to say that next week I will be doing a review on M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, the finale to his superhero trilogy. And if you have any questions or comments on that, then please let me know for next week. Have a good week. Can't wait to see you then.